Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another episode of the In Focus podcast, brought to you by the South Coast Artist Index. And today we have a transplanted visitor, formerly from the area and now residing in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'll let him introduce himself, spell his name, and tell us what he does.
All right. Well, my name is Johnny Gwynn, Johnnny, and then Gwynn is Gwynn. And originally from Falmouth on Cape Cod, and spent a lot of time in the South Coast, actually, before moving down to Nashville. And I am currently residing there as a singer-songwriter, but more in the songwriter aspect of it.
Okay. Now I know you work for the Standard Times of South Coast Today. What was your capacity there?
So I was basically the what was my title? My title was work for the Arts and Entertainment Department, and I was an editorial assistant. So I did that for about 3 years. So at the time, I would help kind of do a little bit of pagination, but usually did a lot of the, they had a section called Coastin', which is the main arts and entertainment. So I would help out with the calendar and help out with that, as well as do articles and every so often present stuff myself. So.
Yeah. Did you have any interaction with Don Wilkinson, the Artbeat writer?
I did not, actually. We at the time we had in the office when I was doing it, we had probably a small group of like 3 arts and entertainment people, and as well as just some other folks from around the office. The one thing about that paper was there's a lot of people holding a lot of hats in there, so they do a really good job, and it was great to work around that, especially in the arts and entertainment, to kind of just be surrounded by the music and everything like that.
Was Andy Tamalukas there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's always important because it's all really about connections, not just in life and in business and professions, but also with this show, because it's amazing the connectivity of people to others, and some of it is worldwide. What got you going with the whole songwriting thing? I mean, did you focus on music in your high school, any of that kind of thing?
Yeah. So I think from middle school into high school, music was always a big part. For whatever reason, I just kind of really got hooked on it, and hooked on music. Especially, I played jazz in school. I played saxophone and guitar and played in rock bands and everything like that. And then through college, I did the same thing. I just kept on doing it. And, I would play in bands, and especially around when I came back to New England, I would play in bars and do things like that. Especially living on Cape Cod, I got a lot of opportunities to play bars, especially in the summertime, and had some pretty good gigs there. But I think the songwriting thing came from, I kind of had a moment where it was just, you kind of have I broke it down to, to have some sort of career or some aspect in music. If you're going to do music, you're either going to be a performer in the sense that you're just going to be playing songs. They might be your songs. Most likely they're cover songs. Or, there's an opportunity to write your own stuff. And, I basically came to the conclusion that if someone had given me the opportunity, they said, hey, you can either, play and tour the rest of your life, but never play your originals, or never step on a stage again, but you get to have people play stuff that you've written. Like, it was an easy decision for me. I've always been the guy writing stuff for the bands and playing it and everything. So that was kind of the big, like, you know, here's the choice, and this is what always interests me. I get more jazzed up about finishing a song than I do like performing live. So,
I mean, does it come to you naturally? I mean, is it like one of those things where, you know, you're scrubbing the soap scum off your shower, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, wait a minute. And then you go and you're inspired by something that you're not, you know, some people say the best way to think about something is not to think about anything.
yeah, it's kind of been a war of attrition, if anything. I've been very interested in songwriting, and it's just a thing that you just keep on, in my aspect, they keep on working at it. You know, there's some people that I've met who just can kind of just sit down and do it. I need to be the guy who just sits down and kind of just etches out. I'll just write pages and pages of stuff, or just noodle a guitar, and all of a sudden some spark will happen. And that's the one thing for me, is just it hasn't come naturally, but I think it's just a passion to do it. And that's been the biggest thing. It's like, you know, from learning guitar and learning improvisation, I'm really good at just making stuff up on the spot and not getting committed to it. So that's been the biggest like tool, is especially in Nashville, you're just throwing out ideas all the time, and some work and some don't, but you just kind of learn as you go. It's a quantity breeds quality kind of thing.
Okay, the more you do, the better you get, kind of thing.
Yep.
I don't know if it was Dylan, but I'm leaning a little bit towards it. It was, I mean, he had like a pocket full of notes. He would just like find scraps of paper, and something would just pop into his head. He'd observe something and he'd write it down, and he'd stick it in his pockets, and then he'd go home and, you know, start going through all the notes and arrange them somehow, and then from that is what he got his inspirations from.
Yeah, I definitely am part of that school too. I am constantly just adding notes in my iPhone. You know, I'll just be taking that out and putting out notes, turns of phrases. I pay attention to even things like I do a lot of reading, but I also look at a lot of like magazine covers and things like that. You always get weird turns of phrases, especially from being up in New England. When you kind of move down south, there's certain turns of phrases or things that people say. And, you know, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I spent a good amount of time as a bartender down here. And as soon as people start drinking, some titles start to fall out, you know, as soon as the tongue gets a little loose. So I've definitely been the benefactor of, you know, serving someone a couple beers and they give me the title for the song I write the next day, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to ask you, you know, obviously we have our own way of saying things up here. And, you know, I only spent 2 years in Miami, but that was enough. And, you know, bugs, heat, and crime. And it's like, that's what I always say, like why I came back. But the weird thing is that there are turns of phrases, and well, you know, like down there, like I'll have a Coke, and you give them a Coke, and they're like, what the hell's this? It's like, I didn't tell you what flavor I wanted. Well, I just gave you a Coke.
Yeah.
Because everything's Coke, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's little, yeah, there's just like weird, well, not weird, but it's just not what I'm used to. And I will say we have plenty of stuff that we say up in New England that does not as translate as well. You know, the biggest one I can say is, you know, if you have an ice cream and you ask for Jimmy's on top of it, it's a lot of question marks. And that's just something that's just a lesson you learn the hard way when you move anywhere else. So.
Right. Yeah. I remember the one lesson that still reverberates. We were in a public building. We had to fill out some forms or whatever, and I was looking for a bubbler.
Yep.
And they would, like, their eyes are bugging out and they're smiling because they're trying to be polite and have no bloody idea what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. But I think that's the best thing, is when you're kind of a fish out of water. Sometimes those things, you hear those little things and they just kind of spark something. So that's kind of the best thing, is like, you know, as soon as I open my mouth, there's a lot of people down there who are like, Yankee. Like, they're just like, got it, man. But just hearing, kind of being a fly on the wall for some of the stuff is good, because you'll pick up little things that kind of spark you. So
Mm-hmm.
it is a benefit. So.
Are you familiar with John Prine?
Yes.
Talk about writing. My God. I mean, there are a lot of people who write, but he had a handle on language that was phenomenal.
Yeah. He is just in a whole other category. And, I'll be honest, I didn't really listen to him a lot. I mean, before I moved to Nashville, and, I started playing around here, and all the kind of cool Americana people were like, oh, John Prine. And he would actually show up to shows, for people, and just like hang out, or, for little things. And so you'd see him out every so often.
Mm-hmm.
Very unassuming guy.
Yeah.
Then you listen to the music and you're like, this guy is unbelievable. It's just,
Yeah.
he's just a wealth of, there's no idea too little that he just can't expound on, and he's just clever.
I mean, I can spot him off, because that's, pretty much in college, once the disco started to come up, I sort of like backed off and I went to folk. So him, Eric Anderson, Steve Goodman, those guys. But I mean, there are just like, Blue Umbrella, Rest Upon My Shoulder, Hide the Pain While the Rain Makes Up My Mind. It's poetry, for God's sakes.
And it's just so natural.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing where I think what kind of brought me to actually moving down to Nashville was, as I said, I kind of decided to do this songwriter thing. I wanted to focus on that. So I started to actually do what's called NSAI, the Nashville Songwriting Association International.
Mm-hmm.
They have these little satellite meetings, and they actually have one up in Waltham for Massachusetts. There's I know buddies who run it in Rhode Island and Connecticut, but I started going to the one in Waltham, and it opened my eyes to all these people who are very lyrically inclined to music, which is I grew up with a lot of rock and roll, a lot of pop, even a lot of jazz, so it's a lot of melody that I'm used to. So, people like John Prine, or any of these, newer artists, the Jason Isbells, the Sturgill Simpsons, there's just especially in country, there's such a natural language and poetry to it that just seems to just be effortless. So to kind of see that, it was like, that's something totally new for me, and it's probably not my strong suit. So moving to Nashville, I run into people all the time who just have such a grasp on language and the effortlessness of just sitting there throwing out stuff that it's very, it's cool to see. I mean, it's probably like where other people see someone play guitar and do like a solo off the top of their head. I'm impressed when anyone can do a turn of phrase that just like, it's like, that's amazing to me.
Are you attracted to follow, read any poetry?
I not necessarily. Seamus Haney I'll like check out, and a few other ones, but it's sometimes for me it's hard to actually go through the reading of poetry. Though Robert Penn Warren is one of my favorite writers with All the King's Men. Sometimes you read some of these books. I'm right now in a John Steinbeck binge mode right now in this in the quarantine that we're still in. And sometimes just the colorful language that those guys use, there's always kind of something interesting, especially with Robert Penn Warren is a poet who wrote this book, All the King's Men. And it's clear the guy's a poet because there's just such colorful language and things like that. So I wish I could say I was a lot more interested in poetry. It's almost like reading it can be kind of hard, but when I hear it, I can hear how the rhythms go and everything, and it's a little bit more understandable for me. It's like reading Shakespeare.
Okay, yeah. I was just going to say that you jumped on it. It's like reading Shakespeare is one thing, but hearing it is so totally different.
I was just talking to a buddy last night saying in high school we did this whole study of Hamlet, and it was great, and we got to get into the work and get into it. But, I was kind of getting bogged down in it. And this is, and I love reading. I love all this. But it was getting kind of hard. And then at the end of the year, we watched the Kenneth Branagh version of it, which is like a 5-hour film. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. Like this is, yeah, like now I get it. So that's a tough thing is, for me, it's like poetry and plays are in a thing that if you can kind of get the rhythms and everything, it's great. But even Shakespeare, it's like I kind of need to see it. So I don't know what that says about me. I studied English in college, and I'm still like I just need to see it.
Well, I mean, there's something called VAC. It's neuro linguistic programming. It's VAK, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and there are people who are made up of all three. In order to feel something, they have to. In order to hear something, they have to feel it. Like for me, for example, like with organ music, and I'm talking pipe organ, E. Power Biggs or Virgil Fox kind of thing. There's no feeling like being in a church or a space where there's a pipe organ cranking up, because you don't hear it, just hear it. It goes through you. The sound is like phenomenal. It's like a whole nother, experience. But visually, traditionally they would say men are more visual. That's why there's like Playboy and all those other things. Women are more auditory, which gets men in trouble because the women always say in a man-woman relationship, you never listen to me, and the guy will respond, but I showed you.
I showed you,
I nodded my head.
We also, as a guy who works with works at mincing words and how they mean it, I've been known to misspeak. So that even at the words can be really tough.
Yeah. I'm going. Just had a flash on the Bee Gees. It's only words, but it isn't really only words, because I think a really good piece of music, a really a big hit, in a popular genre, is those lyrics. And look at 9 Inch Nails and I Hurt Myself, and then Johnny Cash comes along and does a cover of it, and because of the pacing of the song, the presentation of the song, now you're really hearing the words.
Yeah, and that's a song, and that's just a great song, because it's, if you hear the 9 Inch Nail version, which is the original, just you kind of get lost in the 9 Inch Nails effect of it all.
Yeah.
But then when you hear Johnny Cash do it, you realize how good of a song it is, because these two different artists can kind of take these chords and lyrics, just the basic things, and make two different songs that, depending on which one you really enjoy. I mean, personally, that Johnny Cash one is just, I can always listen to that. But that's why I think a great song is almost one that, if you take it as it is, you just give it to anyone and they can do well with it. Again, I'll bring up Tom Petty. It seems like anyone can play a Tom Petty song and it sounds really good. There's so many things of Free Fallin', or Boys of Summer is another one that just people keep on playing out. Versus, like, I will say this, like, Bruce Springsteen, I think, is a great songwriter, but if anyone plays a Bruce Springsteen song, I'm like, oh no, you're just ripping off Bruce. Where someone can play Boys of Summer and you're like, oh yeah, you've made that your own. Like,
isn't that weird? I mean, it's like a lot like with television shows from the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, the classic days of television, like Bewitched. And then they try to do a redo on it. And it's like, you can't do it. I mean, you name more failures of people trying to do a remake of something, then it's very, very rare that you're going to get a situation where you do a redo or makeover or whatever you want to call it, and somebody goes, oh my God, it's even better than the original.
Yeah, and I think with music, there's a weird thing too, where, there's a weird magic to the simplicity of it. A lot of songs that are kind of big and popular are rather simple. And I think it's when you get involved with music, there's such a emphasis on theory and complicating chords, and solos and flashy stuff, that some of these popular songs you look at are, 2 or 3 chords. Right now I'm kind of doing some personal research, just that there's, 1 chord songs. Their songs are just 1 chord, and they, Chain of Fools by Aretha Franklin, and there's a couple CCR ones. There's one other I was just listening to, but it, there's a simplicity and just like, there's 1 chord. You don't need to do a lot of stuff with it. And, I think that's kind of the key to some of those things, is not overcomplicating things. I think that's where the Bruce Springsteen, he's so great, because he's just making these epic sagas and everything. But when you try to do it, you're missing some quality to it. Whereas like, a Tom Petty is just like, if you look at it, he's got his voice, the chords, it's pretty open. And, I can hear anyone play his songs and you're like, oh, it's just, he just gave you the roadmap and you can kind of do whatever with it.
Right. He's not iconic like Springsteen is.
Yeah.
Or Boz Scaggs. I mean, Boz Scaggs is another guy where, when you hear the song, right away you think of Boz Scaggs instead of paying attention to the song, kind of thing. Style-wise, now I'm doing a shift from subjective, abstract painting, going back to realistic or objective type painting. And one of the biggest things was it's style, and that's a word that is not really understood. To me, it means approach. Mm-hmm. So what's your approach?
For like just approaching songs and things like that?
Well, yeah, in other words, because genre is the big umbrella, and then the style or whatever fits under that.
So I think my approach so far, which has worked, just with a couple, I'll do what's called a Nashville co-write. So we'll sit down together, and it'll be either just myself and another person, or a couple people. We'll sit down and we'll just try to like write a song. We'll throw out ideas like titles or, riffs or anything like that. And, I think the thing that has worked is like, when I've had more success or had more enjoyable experiences when we didn't worry about, I guess, the genre of it all. I've gotten country songs out of things that I thought were like pop songs, or verse. Like I thought it was a country song, and, you can kind of mold it into something else. So I think the approach for me is usually, you just, if it sounds good, like if it's, for me, I love a big chorus. So if we've got a big chorus in it, we got a big sing along kind of thing, I'm usually like, we can kind of do whatever, it kind of fits in there. And especially if we have like a great title, if you have a great title, that can make it easy. But that's the thing is, I think with songwriting, especially with, in a place like Nashville, you're just kind of reinventing the wheel every time. Like you're just trying to refine that magic. Like I know how to write a song, but every time I pick up a guitar, I got to figure it out again, because I can't just write the same thing over and over again.
Right.
But that's the fun.
Willie Nelson, I mean, I don't think a lot of people really understand his range. I mean, this guy is phenomenal. I mean, he goes back into the late into the 40s.
Well, he goes. He's another guy that, again, it's because the song is so great, you can kind of do whatever with it. Like, so Crazy, Patsy Cline, one of their biggest songs and everything. And Willie Nelson wrote it. If you listen to Willie Nelson's version, it's very jazzy. He kind of, he has this jazz delivery to it. It's off kilter. It's a little bit like this. And I remember reading his biography and saying that, Patsy Cline, like heard the song, loved it, went into the studio and tried to do the Willie Nelson version of it. And it was just, she didn't have the right beats to it. But when, she and the band just did it, like just kind of felt it out, she kind of made it a country song and everything. And that's where it's like, Crazy is such a simple, easy song that, with Willie, it can be jazzy, and Willie can kind of jump all these different genres and everything. And he is, he's unbelievable. But that's where he's another guy where it's like, you can kind of take the song and make it your own too. But like Hello Walls is, just a simple country song, weird title, and then It's Always on My Mind is just like,
Oh, yeah.
like he's just a guy who has this huge range, and he's got a style that's all his own, but he just can kind of he's able to reinvent it while sounding like himself. It's like the greatest it's the greatest songwriting skill you can have.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe how prolific he was, in not just the amount of songs that he wrote, but also the range, like you said, of styles. And some of those jazz, I mean, some of those standards, I mean, those are like what I grew up with in a neighborhood where everybody played guitar. And
Yeah.
they had their old Epiphones with the F holes cut out on, and the parents of my friends, and they would just get together and just massive jam sessions, simple chords, and just the rhythm of the strumming, and it was just phenomenal. So it was another way of entertaining yourself, but every time somebody took over a stanza or whatever, they sort of made it their own, and it was kind of beautiful. And speaking of which, when you hear someone else sing one of your songs, what are the emotions or thoughts that jump into your head?
So yeah, I've been lucky enough to have a couple artists, I guess, cut the songs. What's called Nashville, when you record it, cut the songs, and it's songs that we've worked on together. And it's I enjoy it a lot more than hearing myself do it. First of all, because I'm like many people, can't stand the sound of my own voice. So hearing someone else,
my world.
hearing someone else sing it is awesome. But yeah, I just like hearing. I love hearing the other person sing it, just because you have a sound in your head, and then you're kind of hearing either your words or melodies sung through someone, or you're kind of seeing an image that maybe I couldn't complete myself. So because this person is doing, singing the song or playing it, it's different than I would have done it. And it just is, it's a weirdly, it's a weird situation where you're kind of hearing a song through a whole different lens. And I think that's very cool. Cause I know how it would sound if I did it. I'm kind of used to my sound. So it's almost like hearing it with fresh ears every time. And, sometimes I've heard stuff, I'm like, whoa, I can't believe, like
has somebody else's rendition, somebody else singing something you wrote, has it moved you in a way that you like never expected to be moved? Like I wrote that.
You know what? I will say, so I have basically I have a song right now which I'm hoping to pitch out or release or something, and it's called it's a very kind of goofy, summery song called Floridice. That's all about Florida and kind of goofy. And I just had this weird idea for it and built it up. So I had a demo where I sang on it, just to kind of have it on file. And then I actually had a friend with a great, country voice come in just to kind of demo the song for it. And it just brought this to this other level that I still listen to this demo. And, it's almost like I just can't believe that, like that it exists.
Yeah.
But I'm part of it. And I just, it's a thing where like, I just love that I just have that song. Like it might not do anything or anything like that, but it's crazy to have like, a song that you wrote that someone else is singing on, that just like every time you hear it, it's like, wow, I can't believe I was part of that. There's an incredulous fact to it because, I'm just not as big a part of it. So you're kind of hearing it. I think that's when it's good. It's like, I'm a fan of my own stuff. Like there's plenty of songs I've written that I'm like, eh.
I think it's the same thing, being a painter. Sometimes you look at a piece of work that you meh, and it's just been buried in a stack someplace, and then you're looking for something else, and you look at this piece like weeks, months, years later, and you go, oh my God, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah.
What's it doing buried over here in the corner, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of times I listen, it's like, it'd be like the similarity of painting is like, you see the brush strokes, you see what you're doing. Like I'll see some songs or some demos and I'm like, oh, I hear this, or maybe this is here, but then, yeah, like every so often, it's like, I think the sign of a good song too, you know, is the evergreen ability of it. It's the thing where you can kind of, you like it, you put it down for a while. If you come back in a couple months, you like it. It's like, well, there's probably something to this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and it's probably gibberish musical speak, but you know, sometimes you can get so into the details, like, oh, I shouldn't have used that minor augmented fifth in that
Yeah.
stanza,
And that's
and that's all you're thinking about, you know.
So that's the thing is, I think the best writes that you know, the songs that have worked out for me are the ones that have come like, you know, relatively easy or quickly, because as musicians, as artists, you kind of have this, you kind of want to complicate everything. You want to impress your like musician friends, or your, you know, you do certain things. I'm just, so I did a lot of jazz, so I love putting in like weird chords to kind of mess around with melody. And, you know, sometimes at the end of the day, I'm listening to it, I'm like, oh, that's really cool if I was doing, you know, like the math of, you know, like musical theory, but you know, that's not what people want to hear. They want to hear Brown Eyed Girl, sha la 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 la, you know, any of that stuff. So they're not interested in kind of like, hey, cool augmented this to, you know, a flat 7 or this. They're like, but you know, I don't want to listen to that, man.
But then again, like, there comes along this Italian guy named Ennio Morricone, who for 70 years, I mean, he was one of the most prolific composers for, you know, musical scores, movie scores, and The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Fistful of Dollars. I mean,
oh yeah,
totally. I mean, you just never knew what you were going to experience with this guy, because he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and some of it, you know, I'm not a, you know, my musical knowledge. I was a lazy student, so I never, you know, but some of the stuff is just based, I think, on basics, and he took a basic and he just expanded on it to this crazy point where it just became I can hear the scores going through my head right now. It's like,
oh yeah,
how the hell did he come up with that? Which brings me to this question. With you, and it's not always, it could be sometimes, it could alternate. Is it the music first that crawls into your head, or is it the words first?
So I think typically with me, I'm very melody oriented. So in a place like Nashville, so I'll say this: I'm very melody oriented with music. I always kind of have been, just because of playing in, you know, rock bands and pop stuff, and playing in jazz. I'm always listening for the hook or the big chorus or the big melody. I just, you know, I got really used to. I will say this: I made my bones, as I said, you know, playing things on the Cape or at bars around Boston, and so the one trick of it is that I would play original material, and I would figure out very quickly if it worked or not, because people would either get louder in the crowd or they would get quieter. So they got quieter, I knew I was onto something. And so a lot of the time they have, you know, these clubs have terrible PA systems, you know, no offense clubs, but they, you know, the words kind of get muddled. So I got really used to just being like, it didn't really matter. Early on, I was like, didn't really matter about the words as long as I had a good hooky chorus that could, you know, get people back. And that was kind of a skill that worked for me. The thing where I'm kind of glad I moved out of that comfort zone of kind of a rock music into songwriting, especially in Nashville, that's country music, is a lot of country music is written, as I say, from the title down, which I think is actually, from doing this, is like, it's a different way to do it, but it can kind of be an easier way to do it, because there's plenty of times if you're a melody person, you can get this great melody, this great structure to the song and everything, and then when it comes to words, it's just so hard to kind of chip away at it. In Nashville, what they do is they'll do right from the title down. So they'll have a title, they'll just say, and you know, if you watch the Eagles documentary, this is great, like 4-hour Eagles documentary, they kind of talk about doing the same thing. So, you know, you just have this title, and then you're always writing towards the title. So, if I had, I have one that was, I had one that was a song called Even Better. So I had a title, and then we kept on writing things, and it would always go back up to Even Better. I had another title like Bottom of a Barrel, Top of the World. It was like all drinking songs. So it just chip away, but it always has to, every line kind of has to lead back to that title.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of an interesting thing. And if you look at a lot of country music, is great about it, because if you look at this, or, especially the Eagles, if you're into that too, all of that kind of like leads back to the title and everything. So that can be kind of if you have a good enough title, it can be an easier way that all of a sudden all the words start coming in, and then you can just slap the melody on there. So, not that one is more important than the other, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, basically. And so coming to Nashville, it's been nice to kind of find kind of lyrical ways to approach music versus, always approaching it with the melody.
Now, you talk about being in clubs, and doing original music, testing it out. If you watch like American Idol or America's Got Talent, usually the whole thing is, if you do original music, it could be the kiss of death, because the audience has nothing to hook their brain on. And sometimes, I wonder too about an original piece of music. If there's nothing that taps the buttons in their memory, like the Eagles or Prine or Springsteen or whatever, they're not listening. They just stop. They need the familiarity. I guess that's what it is.
Yeah, and that was which is absolutely true. I mean, that's kind of the toughest thing, is showing someone something new. So for me, my reason is I always was interested in, just doing my own stuff. I wanted to be the guy who write the songs, because I love to see, when people hear a great song, it just resonates with them. And, my dream would be to have a song, that does something like that. Now I will say that, part of the reason was I played in cover bands, and I did some of the singing just because I needed to just kind of do it. And, I've ruined a lot of songs by a lot of famous people. And so there's plenty of times where I'd play some Rolling Stones song and people are like, I know what song that is. And boy, is that kid not doing that. Like, he just doesn't get it. So,
yeah.
So I kind of came to the thing that I was like, well, I'd rather kind of, my thing was like, I'd rather follow my own sword, basically, where if you didn't like my original, it wouldn't upset me. Mm-hmm. But if you did, I felt great about it. And it kind of, in Nashville, they do love original music, and there's a lot of venues that actually accommodate that. There's a lot of things called listening rooms, and so you can play your original stuff, and usually people are quiet and listening, and clap politely and everything after each song, which I think is great. And to have that ability to do that is awesome. The one issue I had with it was actually the reason I actually liked doing it up in New England was that, there are sometimes where there's just, the song's not that good, but since people are quiet, you can't tell where the audience is going. So, there are plenty of times I would, the bars would say like, we only want covers, we don't want originals. And I would sneak originals in there, hoping people wouldn't notice. And, a lot of the times they did. And a lot of times they did because they weren't that good. So you kind of but you could kind of gauge the audience to do that. And I always just loved the kind of living on the edge aspect of like, man, if they hate this, they hate this, but like, man, if they like it, there's some magic to it. So that just always resonated with me. And I have friends who, kind of just do cover bands are making a living doing that, which is awesome. There's a lot of ways to make a living in music. My thing was I just always liked just the writing aspect of it. So, I'm still that kind of way. I'd rather fall on my own sword with, an original. And even if you don't like it, that's fine with me. I'll just try harder the next time. But if you do like it, it just feels like such a win.
Then there's a double-edged sort of so you're covering people, you've got stage presence, personality, uh, you can put your own mark on a song, and so you start rising. But then the dangerous thing starts now. Like, well, you got to start doing original work, which is kind of weird because if you try to do original work, nobody wants to listen to you.
Yeah.
It's like it's a weird, it's a one-way street. I mean,
Well, it's a weird thing because two things can happen there where you either get caught doing, bar band gigs, and then you're just covering for the rest of your career. You're just doing the same songs over and over again. Or, you get to a point where they're looking for originals and you can't really, you're just not as in tune to that. But that's kind of the thing where it's like someone like me, or what I'm interested in is like, I kind of need those people. I need those great singers who kind of might need a great song and a great original song. And, maybe that's just not their strength. Just like my strength isn't, singing or performing. I can do it, but there are people, especially living in Nashville, you realize like, I can play guitar, I can sing, but there are people who can do it much better than I can. And so that's actually a bonus because, well, maybe they can't do a certain thing that I can do. So maybe I can help out. A couple artists that I've worked with or, had rights with, some of them are just, they're ready to go. They got their image and you're just kind of in the room to help, work some ideas out or say like, ooh, here's a cool way to approach this, or here's a different way. But yeah, in a sense, for if you're doing the songwriting thing, you need those great singers to be able to sing those songs. Cause, I can perform the songs and, because I'm not as proficient a singer, maybe the certain emotion doesn't get crossed or certain notes don't resonate. But man, it's like, if you can get it's those great singers, we need them to kind of just focus on being great singers. Like, cause those are the guys who kind of can project the songs and, maybe you're just in the room to help them get the image of a song out there. But yeah, it's like, you need each part. So
yeah, I mean, because and the other thing too is like we talking about getting hooked on a certain chord or whatever. It's the same thing where sometimes you're just too close to it, and somebody else is approaching it with a fresh set of eyes or ears, and is like totally buzzing with, oh my God, I can really get into this, and I can own this.
Yeah, and I think there's a thing too where it's like, you can be, I think with a great song, or the whole original song aspect is like, you can be a great guitar player or singer or something, and, you write a song. And, sometimes you could be too proficient at your instrument to realize like people, will hear a singer singing and they can have amazing range. And then they do an original song. And then by the end of the song, someone asks like, oh, did you get the name of that song? Or did you get that? And someone's like, no. And it's like instantly forgettable.
Yeah.
Like there is a thing for like, if a song hits, it's almost like hitting, sometimes like a hit song, I feel like it's almost like baseball. You hear, when you hear a major league player hit a home run, it just hits a little differently. There's just a crack of that bat.
Yeah.
So like sometimes you can hear these originals that, and I, being in Nashville, you hear a lot of original music and some of them sound good and everything. And you're like, oh, I like that. But then there's times you hear songs and you just go, it just hits differently. And you go, oh, I get it. It's a whole thing. And I've heard plenty of those songs that eventually became songs that, artists did or on the radio. And they have that little magic quality, that different crack of the bat that just makes you go, oh, wow. And that's what you're looking for.
And now it brings me to the curse of the hit. Where, okay, you're known for this particular piece. You can't get out of a venue without playing this piece or several, well-known hits that you've had. And it's like grinding dragging your fingernails over a chalkboard. You've played it so many times. It's almost like aversion therapy. If you want somebody working in your restaurant not to eat the shrimp, you tell them they can eat all the shrimp that they want, and your losses will actually be less in the long run, because knowing that they can do it whenever they want and then having as much as they've already had is like, nah, I'm good now,
Yeah.
So is that like a some sort of a pinnacle thing where you say to yourself, oh God, if I have to play this thing one more time, but at the same time, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Exactly. That's kind of double-edged sword. So I will say this, since I don't do a ton of performing anymore, it's probably not the issue that with me. Kind of my whole thing is the goal in life would be basically, you hear these songs that you hear a million times in grocery stores, and you walk in the store and you hear it. I would love someday if I walk in that grocery store and the song comes on that I wrote, and someone just is in there and you go, oh, I love this song. This is great. This song's over here and everything. But I mean, like, the absolute dream, in my opinion, walking in that same store, song comes on, there's a person who just goes, this song again? I hear this all the time. I'm so sick of this song. This is just played all the time. Because now it's like, you're at a different level.
Yeah.
You're at a level that's like, that song will probably, it hits this thing that's like, it's an evergreen song. You just keep on hearing it over and over again. That, like Brown Eyed Girl is the bane of Van Morrison's existence. And he'll be the first one to tell you that. But like, there's something about that song that, like, even people say, oh, I really hate this song and stuff. When it comes on and they get to that chorus, they go, all right, I'll do it one more time. Like, I'll do this one more time. But
well, like club performances too. I mean, I guess you get that instinct. You're gauging the crowd, and if you want to mellow them out, it's either something with the Eagles or Morrison, and you get them on your side because if not, you'll be dodging beer bottles.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's the thing, is like, it's a weird art form that comedians have to be coming up with new material all the time. They can't go and recycle the same old stuff over and over again. It gets very stale.
They can't even tell the same story the same exact way, right? Because they keep tweaking it, right?
Yeah, but I mean, music, it's like, if you write a hit song and let's just say you write a hit song with your band, and you're in your mid-20s and that thing just hits, that can be your career until you're 50. You just put it at the end of set lists. There's some guys who play the song twice in concerts. I've seen plenty of guys who have like one song and then they'll play it a bunch of times. But I think, as much as it's like probably an annoyance as the artist or performer, I think you gotta also take into account that, like, there's a reason that song resonates. And I think you should kind of, and I think artists do, they might, it's like any kind of job, even if you work for, if you're having to perform, if you work in sports, or you do have you work for the movies, there's probably a time that you just go, oh, it's a job. But then every so often you kind of step back and you're like, actually, this is pretty cool. Like, this is a pretty cool thing. So, I mean, there's plenty of guys who probably have one song, and that's the thing that keeps on getting them their club gigs and everything. And, as much as it's annoyance to them, they kind of have to just be like, I think you do have to say to yourself, like, well, music, I wrote this song a little bit for me, but for other people. And because they're still enjoying it, there's probably something to it.
Yeah, it has that longevity. How many other writers, and I mean, not that you know every single one, but how many other writers do you know of that came out of this area from our part of Massachusetts?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, the one thing is, especially like the New England area has a ton of artists and a ton of great original artists. I mean, having a school like Berkeley there is great, but like on the South Coast, I will say this: I did a lot of the recordings early on for my bands and everything. Actually, in New Bedford, I had a buddy named Clinton Lisboa, who's part of a band, Half Hearted Hero. So they're kind of they're in the the punk band, a little bit of emo stuff. I hope they're not offended. I did brand them as that, but so I would do a lot of recordings with them, and there's like especially in New Bedford, there's a great scene where you've got great singer-songwriters coming out of it, but also just like bands. Like you have the classics, like, I mean, Tavares. So that's always going to be there, but then you've got guys like a Wilhelm Scream that are like, a punk band,
right,
out of New Bedford, and they'll do, they work at No Problemo, or they own the store, and they're still just like doing music and touring all around. And there's just, I think the nice thing about New Bedford, even, the few times I got to play out, was just that, it's an arts community, and there's just, if it was any kind of music, as long as you, were committed to your vision of it, it was just, people enjoyed it. I mean,
Yeah.
Another one is Have Heart. Have Heart was another punk band who was big, and they're out of New Bedford, and I think just because of or out of the South Coast, and they just were, they had this whole vision for what they wanted to do. So I think that's the one thing. Is I would say my experience was probably more in the rock and pop and punk thing, but it's just a ton of stuff.
Well, it runs across Beaver Brown. I think there were people that were from Beaver Brown, and it was a crossover from Beaver Brown to Tavares because of the Antunes, and then from Antunes they went to Boston. So it's like, there is an incredible mix, and I've got an upcoming podcast with Ralph Hickok, who was the Sunday magazine editor at the Standard Times. And in that particular podcast, we went over a lot of the musical heritage of the area, and just jazz alone was phenomenal what came out of here. I think he said one of the arrangers or composers worked with Duke Ellington. So
oh, wow.
we're talking a huge thing, which it's part of your legacy, obviously. So if I gave you a magic wand, this is what I call the Barbara Walters questions. She always, if you were a plant, what kind of a plant would you be? But if I gave you a magic wand and I gave you one wish right now, and you had 3 years for this wish to come true, I'll put a time limit on it. What would that wish be?
Let's just call a spade a spade. If I could have a hit, a song that I wrote that became like a hit or a cult, or just got on the radio, got on those grocery store playlists and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the thing. I mean, the greatest for me, the coolest thing about music and songs, especially songwriting, is when you have like an original song, or you do some songwriting, and you see someone like sing the words back to you, it's a very cool thing. And especially seeing someone perform a song that you wrote and seeing the audience respond back to it is like such a cool thing. So, I mean, the goal would be to, just to have some song that resonated with people, that got out to everyone, that everyone seemed to at least like and sing along to. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would be the goal, is to someday turn on, 3 years would be awesome. To have a song that, I'm driving around, back in Massachusetts, taking a trip up, and turn on the radio and just hear that song that I wrote in Nashville, or, somewhere else in the country, and hear that song on the radio mm-hmm. somewhere else, kind of thing. So that would be very cool.
Do you know of anybody from this area that went to Nashville, before you, before your time, and became, well, maybe they weren't a household name, but their music became something that a lot of people don't know? Because
are you saying just from the New England or South Coast area?
Yeah, South Coast area. Yeah, I mean, they, and that's another thing with writers. I'm assuming, is that you are invisible sometimes. You're the background person. You're the one that does all the bloodletting, and writing and rewriting, and then you give it to a performer, and they've got to go out and they've got to do it. So it's like some equilibrium that's going on there. But they're known for the work, and you're just basically the little,
Well, that's the thing. I will say, when I moved down, I didn't know too many from at least from the South Coast area. But now that I've been down here, there are folks that travel back and forth mm-hmm. That I've seen. I was part of a group of it was called New England and Nashville, set up by this guy, Matt Casey, and a few others, but he had this like Facebook group of performers that would go back and forth to Nashville. And, you know, there are people that, you know, I still write with, still see, you know, going back and forth and everything. You know, one guy who's not so much South Coast, but, you know, is out of Rhode Island and plays around is this guy, Kevin Hirchin, who plays a bunch around there. I've seen names like Rebecca Correa, who could go back and forth. I don't know her personally, but I've seen the name kind of pop up and everything. And there's a few others that in that kind of, I'll say South Coast, South Shore that I know have gone back and forth. But, you know, it's kind of different because, I decided to move down here just because I was like, you know, it's hard to have the songwriting thing going back and forth from New England. Though I will say there's an artist writer called Lori McKenna who's out of Stoughton, Massachusetts, and she writes pretty much half of the hit songs you hear on country radio, it seems like. And she's just goes back and forth from Stoughton, but you know, that would be the dream, but you know, we can't all do that. But it is nice to see there is a contingent of kind of New England and Southern New England people that I'll come across all the time in Nashville, and they're all kind of doing the same thing. I mean, I don't know what it is about the area that people are very interested in the arts and like especially music, but you know, there's a lot of us down here in Nashville.
Well, I was just looking, like, I think for television and movies, Worcester, my God. Yeah. Worcester's got like, you know, scads of people. It's just not like, you know, 2 or 3 of them or a half dozen. We're you know, they just keep popping them out in Worcester. Yeah, so. I don't know what it is about, you know, what about the area. I don't know if it's, there is like an emphasis on the arts or something that there's something in this dirty water that we're drinking. But, you know, there is a thing where it's like, you start to see a lot more people from, you know, New England. I don't know if it's, I know for me, it's just, you know, I think it's there's a little bit of the Irishness of, you know, just you can never, you know, you're always interested in hearing a great tune and singing it and everything. Right, I don't know how many times I've sang like, you know, No Nay Never in my life, but like that song never gets old. And I think just seeing people enjoy that music kind of like stuck with me. So it's true. Well, thanks so much, Johnny. This has been great. Believe it or not, our time's coming to an end. Any last words?
Nothing. Well, I'll just give speaking of my buddy Clinton Lisboa, I'll just give a shout out to I think his new venture, which is out of Westport. He is part of the, oh boy, they are called Railroad Park Recording Company. Yeah. So I'll just give him a shout out because he used to do all my demos and stuff back in the day, and he's someone that's a really good friend. And if you're in the South Coast area and looking for music, look for those guys. Railroad Park Recording Company. He doesn't know I'm promoting him like this, but just trying to get my man some business down there. So. Well, and
I tell you, if you can drop him a line and say, "Hey, go on Ron's show," that would be great too. Because I'm trying to get everybody. He
would be a great guy because he has recorded. You know, he has done a lot of recording. He has done it all New Bedford, and he's recorded everyone in every genre. So he'd be a great person to talk to as well.
Yeah, there are scads. I mean, all of a sudden now they're just popping in my head. Ron Gamache, Joe Carrier, Ron Gamache and Joe Carrier. They were like jingle junkies, you know, back in the 80s and 90s. So we have a great heritage. Johnny, thanks so much. And I'm going to wrap this up. So, folks, thank you for joining us. And until the next time, be good to each other out there. See you later. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.